Hello and welcome back to Trumps of Twilight. This is the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, the universe, about books, movies, music that I find interesting, that I enjoy, or a combination of the two. And specifically today, I want to talk about the 1986 David Lynch movie, Blue Velvet. Even more specifically, I want to talk to you about Frank. I went to see Blue Velvet at the cinema recently, and it totally took me by surprise because I've seen it before a couple of times. But when I was younger, I didn't like it as much as I liked a lot of his other films. I saw Eraserhead first. I think the second film I saw by him was Wild at Heart. And then around that time in my teens, Lost Highway came out, and I was just totally in love with how like wild and weird his films were. And then I saw Blue Velvet, and there were a couple of things that kind of tricked me at the time. I think one of them is that it's set in this kind of small town, a little bit like Twin Peaks or A Straight Story, and it's seen through the eyes of the character Jeffrey, Carl McLaughlin's kind of teenage boy, or I think maybe he's 20. He's at college, um, who's somewhat naive. Plus, it's much more linear in its narrative than a lot of his other films. So I kind of found it to be like not wild enough for my taste at the time. But I saw it, like I say, at the movie theatre here last week, and I'm not joking, I couldn't sleep. And I think there are two reasons for this. One is that when I originally saw it, I kind of, because I saw it through the eyes of Jeffrey, Carl McLaughlin's character, he kind of breaks into the house of this singer, Dorothy Valance, who's played by Isabella Rossellini, and she's this kind of sexy older woman, experienced, kind of masochistic, kinky, weird, fascinating. And as a teenager myself at the time, I like related to Jeffrey and I was fascinated with her. And I found his girlfriend, Sandy, played by Laura Dern, kind of annoying and kind of in the way. I just wanted this fantasy of this like weird older woman. But watching it this time around, I felt like Sandy was like my favorite character, and it's all about how good she is and how she believes in love and how the only thing in a broken world that can save you is a kind of like naive, childlike belief in love, which actually David Lynch used to say in interviews that he thought, love would is what would save us. And I think there's some like genuinely, I think it's like a genuinely intended moral of Blue Velvet in a way that you don't really see in his other films. He shows how broken the world is, and it makes you realize how important love and kindness and relationships are. So that was one thing, and I think because I've talked before on this channel about how my work brings me into contact with a lot of the like darkest parts of humanity. I It really hit me. I was like, I saw the film through the eyes of Sandy, and it was terrifying. Also, this time I was like, what is going on with Frank? Frank, of course, is Dennis Hopper's character. He's a criminal. He's taken the singer Dorothy Valance hostage. He is the major antagonist of the film. He's this kind of terrifying, weird, unpredictable psychopath. And the film, as well, is kind of about parents because Jeffrey's mother is basically, if she's around at all, I don't know if the woman is his mother or if it's somebody else. There is a woman in the house. His father is taken ill at the beginning, so he's kind of without a maternal and a paternal figure, and he gets this like sexy older songstress and this crazy guy Frank as these kind of dark versions of parental figures. Um, so Frank is like, I think Zizek talks about this in The Pervert's Guide to Cinema, like the terrifying, obscene father. um, who, kidnaps Jeffrey and threatens him and stuff. When I was a kid and I saw it, I just thought, like, wow, Frank is just this brilliant um, film villain, like this character you've never seen, totally bizarre, swearing constantly and totally without like needing to. Just there's a scene, his friend says, "Here's to your health, Frank," and he's like, "Say here's to your fuck." It's just like totally ridiculous, but simultaneously terrifying. But this time I was like, oh man, who is Frank? Like, how did Frank end up like this? And I think the film kind of tells you, um, because when Frank comes into the film for the first time, um, Jeffrey's hiding in the closet. Isabella Rossellini's character, Dorothy, is out in the house. Frank comes in and she says, "Hi, baby." And he says, "It's daddy, you shithead." And she's like, "Oh, sorry." I think he hits her at that point. He certainly starts to hit her afterwards. And maybe you think, oh, she called him baby like an affectionate name, and he didn't want to be called baby. He wanted to be called daddy. But like shortly after, he starts breathing this gas and sexually assaulting her, and then he's talking as baby, and he's got this little whiny voice, and he's talking to her as if she's his mummy, and he is baby. And I realised that he shifts. He's got two personalities. He shifts between daddy and baby all the time. So there is a part of Frank who is baby, and baby is like fascinated by the woman's body in the way that a small boy is fascinated. So he has this kind of sexual interest, but it's like a childlike interest in an older woman. So he just wants to look at her and like play with her breasts, and while he's talking as if he's a baby, it's like he's regressed. But then in order to be able to um, experience the things that baby wants to experience, he needs this other side of his personality, which is called daddy, who is the one who's always shouting and swearing and threatening people. So there's a little boy in Frank who is terrified and alone and needs contact. And I think that when Frank is at the club watching Dorothy singing, he is the little boy, and he's holding a piece of blue velvet that he's cut from Dorothy's nightgown, and he's almost crying listening to the song Blue Velvet, um, because he's like a little boy, and probably his mum, his real mum, Frank's real mother, wore a velvet nightgown. So baby Frank, who I guess was, what happened to his mum? Was she like murdered? Was she abused by his father? Did she abuse him? We don't know, but something incredibly traumatic happened in Frank's childhood, so that the baby in him is always seeking this mother, and daddy, the abusive father, has to bend the world to his will so that the baby can, for example, hear the song Blue Velvet sung by Dorothy Valance every night. He needs to hear the song every night to soothe him. And in order to bring this about, he's kidnapped her husband and child, and again, mother, father, child. He's kidnapped this child, holding the child and the father hostage so that the baby Frank can hear her sing this song every night. That's not enough though. She has to tell him that she likes to sing it. One last thing about this that totally freaked me out is that Dorothy Valance is a sexual masochist, and as soon as she meets Jeffrey, she initiates a relationship with him. So I think that Frank and Dorothy were having an affair before any of this. She liked him because he was frightening, exciting, um, and he would hit her, uh, which is something that she needs, as we see in her relationship with Jeffrey. But because Frank is so obsessive and because he needs things so specific, it wasn't enough for him to just have a relationship with her. He had to own her entirely. And that's why Daddy had to take over and basically make her his hostage so the baby could come and visit anytime he wanted to. All this occurred to me for the first time while I was watching it this time around. And I'm not joking when I tell you, I could not sleep. Okay, for all I know, this is a well-known theory about Frank from Blue Velvet, but I didn't know it. So maybe you didn't know it, and I'm here to share it with you. Um, I'm interested to hear your own thoughts about Blue Velvet, not just about Frank, about the movie, about the other characters, about things that you noticed about it. Um, I always liked it because I have not seen a Lynch film I didn't like, but it's really gone up in my estimation seeing it again. Please hit the like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you'd be interested to hear from me again, or just look after yourself.